Welcome. If you're wondering why this episode is called From the Vault, this is something new that we're trying. We're taking the week off, and what we'll be doing is using one of our patron-exclusive episodes that was previously published and releasing it in the main feed in order to, one, have something come out on this week since we're not going to, other than this, and also for people to kind of get a taste of what the patron lifestyle is like if you wanted to see the kind of stuff that we do over there. This is a good way to check it out.
And this episode in particular, there's a series of these bonus episodes we do that we call adaptation-adjacent. So it's usually like we've covered something, and either this is an alternate adaptation, or it's like a sequel to an adaptation, or this instance a prequel to an adaptation. Because this one is when we talked about the 2011 adaptation of The Thing. Although it's not even an adaptation, it's a prequel. So it's kind of an adaptation. I don't know. It's messy.
Yeah. I mean, recently in the news, I think a lot of people have probably seen, I think Bloody Disgusting was the first one I saw reporting it. But basically, there were unreleased sort of manuscript or sort of another part of the story that Campbell had written. Yeah. And they're going to be adapting that.
It's been unearthed. Like an alien.
So they'll be adapting. Yeah. I mean, really, it was from another planet. So from another world.
Yeah.
So that's going to be coming out. Maybe
point.
check this out in anticipation of that coming out, or the news of that coming out.
Well, and people ask a lot whenever they hear about a project. They're like, "Oh, have you seen this?" And this is one I get sometimes. Like, "Oh, have you seen the 2011 version?" And there are people who really enjoyed it, people who hated it. We get into it in this episode you're about to hear. This shows you it's a little more relaxed fit than our regular stuff, a little more loose. But I thought it was a good conversation, and hopefully you enjoy it. But we will be back with a regular episode next week where we're starting our Outsider coverage, The Outsider by Stephen King. So if you want to get a head start on your reading, definitely check that out. But we hope you enjoy this.
Welcome, patrons, to bonus episode 7, I believe now.
We're going to try something a little different. We're gonna do a semi-review of a movie, which we haven't done yet, which should be cool. I mean, I enjoyed watching it, so it should be fun to talk about.
I hesitate to call it a review, but we're definitely talking about The Thing 2011, which is a prequel to The Thing. Now, going in, did you know that it was a prequel? We did watch it, yeah. We watched it. Clearly, there's a reason we're covering this as a bonus episode and not as an actual comparison episode.
I think it's open for whatever we want to talk about. We're in the bonus content territory here, so whatever we feel like. So I do want to say we put it up for a vote, and this is what won. We'll continue to add, if we do this in the future, we'll try and add a few new titles. Basically, this is going to be a thing where obviously this isn't a beloved film like a lot of the ones we do. So we know that some people may even listen to this who haven't seen it. So that's all good. That's fine. You don't have to have seen it to listen to this episode.
Going into this movie, did you know it was a prequel?
Yes, I did. I had been told that. I had walked into a room a few times when people were watching it, so I'd actually kind of seen a couple scenes, I guess, but I didn't really watch them, because I'm the kind of person who even if I don't feel like I'm going to love a movie, I still don't want to just walk in at the end of it and see something important. So right. I immediately kind of walked out of the room when I saw that it was on. But I'd seen some stuff in the spaceship later, I knew that was going to happen. Some of that stuff. So. But I mean, one thing that I do want to say very positive is that it was a lot of fun for me to kind of revisit the world of The Thing. And I love that project. And recently I had a birthday party, if you want to call it that, at a gaming bar in Portland. I had some writers come out, and we all gathered around and played The Thing board game. And I mean, I just can't believe I said birthday party. That sounds like I'm 8 years old. That's funny.
Nope, you deal with that. That's canon.
And we all had hats on and a cake now.
Did you guys have a clown? Or?
It was fun, though, because in that game, it's the whole conceit is some people are imitations, some people are humans, and that kind of stuff. And so, of course, I was thinking of that while I was watching the movie. And I don't know, I love this story, and it was cool to revisit it. But there was a point in which I kind of turned on the movie. I came into it open-minded, wanting to really like it, and then there was a point where I kind of turned on it, which we can get to, I guess. But yeah, had you seen it before this?
Yeah, I've seen it before. So
okay, I'd never seen it.
around the time that this was going to come back out. Well, I guess I saw it again before that, but when this movie was about to come out, I was working at a movie theater, and I was like, I watched the original, and I was like, oh, come on, guys, don't let me down. I heard that there was going to be practical effects, which I was excited about, and I was like, they could do something cool here. But I saw it in theaters. I was pretty disappointed, to say the least, especially then. I was a little more savage towards movies because I didn't understand, all of the things that go into making a movie and all of the politics and everything, but did not enjoy it. But watching it this time, I do agree with you. There are things that I enjoy. I like being back in the world. And I will say that I think that there's something, the CG specifically element of this movie, everybody just kind of keys in on that and just like trashes the movie for that. But I think there are other issues other than just the CG.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The only problem with this movie is that I think that's a very easy thing for people to identify, because that's a huge difference. You look at the original, it had no CG, basically no CG, in any of the monster effects at least. And in this, it was a combination. You sent me this video where it shows all the practical things they made, and they're pretty incredible, honestly.
So do you know the story of all of that practical effects stuff?
No, and tell me the story.
Okay. So there's a studio called Amalgamation Studios that does special effects, and they specialize in practical special effects. And they creature designed. They did all of the creatures that you saw in the movie. They designed them and created practical effects and puppetry, and they were basically doing the homage that everybody wanted to see towards the movie. And what happened was so the story goes that the director, but people theorize that it's mostly studio input. Because the director went from being all for practical effects and basically telling the heads of the Amalgamation Studios that they only wanted to have practical effects in this movie, and CG had no place there. Obviously, they knew that it was going to be augmented practical effects. That was his stance starting at the beginning of the movie, and then at the end we got to see the actual outcome of that. And basically, people say studio input caused them to basically put a CG layer over all of their creations. So all of the stuff that we saw in the movie was practical with just CG like layers over top of it.
That's
and basically just so completely taking away. Yeah.
That's so frustrating because I remember seeing and when you sent me that video, I was looking at that and going, that was a practical effect because it looked like CG. And I thought maybe it was just really good. And I can see that they put a layer over it, which is so frustrating because watching that video of like those practical effects look really good, and they didn't. I mean, like some of them obviously were designed to be like to have a layer, like they weren't colorized. It seemed like at times. I don't know.
And some of those were also just test footage, like they were just testing.
Yeah, that's why I was saying I don't know if it was at its final stage when I saw some of those. But that's so frustrating because this movie needed a lot less CG. I think that's the easy thing to say about it, but it is true. It's one of the things. This movie just doesn't look good, and the monster effects just don't look that great. They look okay, but they also even in the 7 years since this came out, those CG effects haven't aged well, in my opinion.
Well, yeah. Anytime that there was a full creature, it didn't look quite as bad, but as soon as you try to merge it with the human, which is exactly what the thing is supposed to be, as soon as you added those human elements, like you've got the face on the creature at the end, or like the merging of the faces, like that stuff does not hold up. And like I'm sure it didn't. I don't remember my reaction, but I'm sure I didn't like it right away.
I did like the merging of the faces scene, regardless of how it looked. I thought it looked pretty gross and pretty convincing. That was like one of my favorites, honestly, because it was like that iconic merged face from the original.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm of two minds. So my main point about this movie is I understand the impetus to want to make the Norwegian story. It seems like it's like going to be kind of a mirror. You can use it as an homage, and you can kind of like fill in a backstory that a lot of people have had questions about. And they tried to do that, and they did an okay job at doing it. But part of the problem with this movie is I think that story is left best as a mystery. I think the whatever they could show us in the Norwegian camp won't live up to what we imagined it was like. And maybe a better movie could have pulled it off. It's possible. But to me, this just falls short of like the craziness that I imagined was going on at that camp for the majority of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, now we're getting into prequel territory where we talk about prequels, which is a whole other thing in and of itself. I mean, it's tough to make a prequel just for the sheer fact that you know where it's going. You know where this prequel is going to end. So that immediately undercuts some of the tension, some of the stuff that's going on, some of the mystery. So the thing being, we knew there was going to be an axe in the door. We were waiting for the beats. When are they going to burn the body out in the snow?
We knew Lars was going to live.
Right. So it's like all of those things. We know that all of that stuff's coming. So we can see that telegraphed at the beginning. And then it's also like, name a prequel that's like that really, really, really holds up as like as good as, if not better than, the original. Like the only one, and it's funny because the only one that really comes to mind is some of the stuff that goes on in The Godfather Part 2, which is prequel stuff technically.
I was going to say Better Call Saul is one.
Yeah,
that holds up.
This is another
that's
question.
A TV show though.
People, yeah, true. People see, people see the Hobbit films as prequels when really the Hobbit was written first, so the story was there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that there was the potential for that to be a solid prequel, let's say prequel film or two, instead of three. But I mean, it's just tough to make a prequel, so unless there's already like a strong.
No, I agree with you, because like you said, the audience knows so much going in, so there's it robs it a lot of the tension. But you could have done it with this movie because what's our main character's name?
Kate.
Kate.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, I guess we assume she dies based off of what we know from the prequel or from the other movie, and she doesn't. I guess from my understanding of it, she doesn't die. She probably ends up getting to the Russians, unless, which I was unclear about, because she gets in the rover at the end and drives away, right?
Right.
So she possibly has enough gas to get to this Russian camp that we hear about, which is not the American camp that we see in the original movie. So there's a third camp out there, which is kind of frustrating because it's like, I don't know, but it's also like they were playing with what audience expected, right? Audience expect everybody to die except for Lars.
I mean, I guess let's run through it a little bit. I guess the other major thing that I want to talk about before that is just the complete lack of characters in this film. There's like three characters, and the rest are all a blur. Like I don't know. It's unfortunate.
They're all just
huge
Norwegian number 2, Norwegian number 3, Norwegian number 4. Oh look, Tormund.
Yeah, that was cool. That was fun to see him, and in a very different role, pretty different than we've seen him as Tormund.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, I think 2011. It must have been before Tormund, the character, was on Game of Thrones, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he was more of an unknown when this came out.
Yep. So I guess let's talk about cast too, because there are some great actors in this cast. I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yes. And
I do want to give them.
Yeah. I want to give her portrayal of Kate props, if that's what you're about to say. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Yeah, the portrayal, and also, I mean, I would say something that I feel like the movie did do well is had a legitimately pretty solid female character lead.
I wanted more women. There was only one other woman, and it was very it was weird because the implication being that the Norwegians had this camp that had like 16 dudes and one woman there. I don't know. I mean, maybe that does happen sometimes, but it feels like that would, like, if it's going to be a mixed gender group, there should be a few more at least, right? Because the idea that you're going to send her down there with 15 guys to Antarctica just feels like kind of a bad idea, unless you're going to, I don't know, mix up the numbers a little bit more. But maybe not. Maybe if everybody's scientists and professional, it'll be fine. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess you would hope everybody would be professional and just kind of everybody would be equals as far as what was going on in the camp. But what I was going to say is the original didn't have any women, so I guess it's a good thing that
No, I'm glad they did. I guess I just felt like they didn't go quite far enough, because the other thing that was frustrating is the other woman, I don't know, her role was so minor, and so I don't know, they telegraphed her being a thing, I thought, pretty heavily, which was kind of frustrating, because part of the joy of it is how surprising it can be, and that one in particular, they really telegraph. Go over there and look for the keys. And they were telegraphing it so much, I thought that it was like a reverse, like they were they were playing with us. But then she ends up being an imitation. And it was like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, the other thing that I want to say about Mary Elizabeth Winstead is just that this, even though it was cool to have her character like that, like you say, I don't think they went far enough. And also the first scene of the movie, well, I guess the second scene of the movie, where they're like going to get her and stuff, is so contrived to me.
Yeah, no, it's very tropey too. It's the whole like, you're a scientist and we found something and it's a mystery and we're gonna bring you. But I did write down that I kind of like that trope when it happened.
Okay,
like I'm kind of a sucker for that trope, even though I totally recognize how cliche it is at this point.
Well, I think the thing that I hated was that, as far as we knew, for any story that happened before this, it was a Norwegian base, so it was their way of pulling in the Americans, so that the American audience would.
Oh, sure, yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just like that's kind of a bummer. I don't know.
No, yeah, and then all the Norwegians are speaking English for the majority of the movie, except for Lars. He's the one guy who like can't, so of course he's the one guy who survives. So it also telegraphs, if they had multiple characters who don't speak English, then we wouldn't have known who the guy was who survives and goes to the American camp. But because they identify and they say, this guy doesn't speak English, the first time you meet him, you go, okay, that's the guy who survives.
Yeah,
because it's the only one that makes sense for the next movie.
There was a little bit of
original
Norwegian speaking people, like when they were communicating amongst themselves. There was a little bit.
No, but they all could also speak English, and
yes.
That character has to not be able to speak English for that scene to work.
Right. We'll talk about this too, but the way that this movie connects to the first one is also not nearly as cool as it should have been.
Okay.
Just the way that it's tacked on at the end. It just like we'll talk about that, but let's go back up to the top.
Hit me with
so
it.
just
now,
I mean, I guess just the fact that the movie's ending, she gets away, and then they're at the they're like all of the conclusion of everything has happened. She's like going off on her own. The alien's not going to leave from that location. But then we shoot all the way back to the Norwegian, and also after the credits have started. So the credits have started. The movie's basically saying it's over, but here's a little thing to connect you right there at the end, and it's like the dog running out in the snow, and I'm like. I would just always imagine something more exciting than the dog always being hidden in the base, because it's basically what they're saying is the dog is hidden in the base the entire movie, and then it just jumps out and runs away at the very end.
You're right. It didn't do anything. Like if we'd seen the dog like kill a couple people or something, and then that's true. It was just kind of tacked on. I mean, I get that, but a couple things I wanted to point out that rubbed me the wrong way. First off, I don't think this movie looks right for it's trying to portray a 1982 time period. To me, there's something about it, and I can't identify it. It was like it wasn't necessarily the clothing. It wasn't necessarily like a particular thing in the set. There was a few times where it looked right, but there was a lot. Like I think especially that initial scene when we first meet Kate. It felt like a modern dissection room.
I think I can nail it down for you.
Man. It's something about it. Okay, tell me what it is.
My theory is that, because what I immediately saw is standard lens choices for newer digital cameras.
You're right, yeah.
So you're going from a film that's shot on film with wider lenses and stuff, and using more artistic lenses, people would say.
Yeah.
And going to something they're like, let's keep the budget fairly cheap. Let's get good glass, but let's not get like, like I mean, I'm sure they use anamorphic in here somewhere, but let's not use like the most expensive, like old. What they should have done is gone and got lenses that they would have used around that time period.
Period specific lenses. Because you got to replicate that same feel to make it feel right. You're right, and they should have done that. And it's a shame because a lot of it does seem like it comes down to budgetary stuff, which is frustrating. But yeah, man, that's so frustrating because if they had just shot it on different lenses and different cameras, it would have looked so much better. It would have looked more authentic.
I'm sure there was probably a decision made. I'm sure somebody brought it up and said, wouldn't it be cool if we shot on the same stuff? And somebody was like, no, it's too expensive. You shouldn't be making the movie then. That's the thing. You shouldn't be making this movie if you're not willing to do the things you need to do it right. Well, yeah, and then the other thing is, we're really in the weeds. Let's just keep going because I feel like we'll get to the story eventually. But the other thing is, what was the one thing that you and I and Arnzen really, really, really like harped on with the original? Do you remember?
It's the practical effects. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that as well as the isolation, right?
Yes.
the feel, the tone, everything about the movie. And like, if you're gonna make a movie that's the thing, it has to be that. It's not about the creature as much as it is about not trusting the other humans and really playing up that are they, aren't they? And I just don't think that this had nearly enough of that. We saw the creature way too early. It was jumping around and flipping around. It was big right away. It was too much too soon, and I think they blew their load.
When we first see the creature in the original, it's the dog version that's kind of like shooting out tentacles and stuff.
But it's got to be like 45 minutes into the movie when it busts out.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, because they already have gone and seen the camp at that point, I think.
I think that it's just like it was a little too early. Like, it was
I agree with that, and you're right. The other thing I'll say is that they clearly wanted to hit all the same beats, and once you kind of identified that that's what they were doing, it became very obvious and frustratingly so. They were like, well, we got to have a scene where they burn stuff standing in the ice. They got to have a scene where there's a dog doing something weird. We got to have a scene where there's people walking through the hallways acting mysterious. And then we got to have a scene where they're doing a test and they're all standing around in the rec room. It was too obvious that they were trying to hit all those same beats. And at some point it crossed a line from homage to just like unoriginal for me. Right. Like, I wanted to see them do more original things. Now, I know they kind of do at the end with the whole spaceship, but like more throughout. And they actually played a little bit with the blood test. Because the blood test actually goes down just like it does in the original novella. I don't know if you remember that. The Joseph Campbell novella. It's the uncontaminated blood and versus the contaminated blood, and they were going to mix them, but then before they can start doing the test, it gets sabotaged.
Okay.
That actually is exactly how it goes down in the novella.
I didn't remember that from the original story.
Yeah. So that was cool. And then the other thing is like all the like spaceship stuff. Because I'd read the original source material, I think it landed better for me than it would have otherwise. Mm-hmm. Because there's so little of that in the original, even though there is a spaceship and shit, like that definitely happens. But all this like high tech stuff was more reminiscent to me of the source, because at the end of the source, I don't know if you remember, like one of them was like making a spaceship and like getting ready to fly away, and there's like a jetpack or something flying around a room. Yeah. Now whether or not that's a good thing, like that maybe should have stayed in the source material. It was there, so bringing some of that higher tech stuff in wasn't like unprecedented in the history of this story. But I think I'm also like, I wanted to have more answers, because I think you could have done a lot of fun stuff with the aliens, as far as like, was the thing the creature that was piloting the ship, or was the thing a virus that infected the creatures that were piloting the ship? And I always thought it was the latter, but I don't know if they really tell us that in this movie.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. That's another thing that I was wondering about, is like, is that the alien's true form that we see in the ice? Or is it, like you said, some sort of other...
I always like to believe that, I mean, I guess this is very xenomorph territory, but regardless, I always like to think of the thing as more of just like an interplanetary virus that takes over shit. Like, I don't know. I've just never really foresaw... Now, it does seem to be able to like mimic cognitive ability. So if they mimicked a creature that knew how to build a spaceship, then it now knows how to build a spaceship, which is pretty fucking scary, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah.
But my point being that like it just seems like a force more than like and it just wants to spread. So I don't think it's like, I don't see it designing a sophisticated spaceship in order to do that. It would be much more like a pod that's going to get me to a fucking place that I can, because I don't, you know what I mean? I don't think they need to like hang out and like shoot the shit in a rec room kind of thing. They don't need that. They just need to survive to get to a place to spread. So my point being that this giant ship seems like it was created by a different culture that was then attacked by the alien. Or by the thing.
I like that more than what I thought. I just assumed that it was the alien ship, but I think I like that a little more, to think that it stole that or built
and
it.
I thought we were gonna get a story. Knowledge. So when she goes in and she sees that big pillar of like pixels, like
which also didn't look great.
I thought it looked okay. It looked weird for sure. But it didn't do anything. It was just there. Like, it could have, as far as we know, it could have just been a light in the room.
definitely to say like you don't know all of what's going on here and you never will kind of thing. Like look how mysterious this is.
But I wanted it to show us something. I think that was the spot where I wanted to get a hint of what happened on this ship.
Well, what you wanted was just annihilation, right? You wanted a full scene of like
no,
the crazy dance thing.
Yeah, sure. I wanted this movie to all of a sudden be amazing. Because Annihilation is, in both of our opinions, I think, an amazing film. So
yeah, amazing.
yeah. No, I mean, this movie is nowhere near that. I wanted something more there because like this movie feels very like I mean, and I'm not slamming fan fiction, but this movie feels like fan fiction to me. It feels like somebody just playing around in a story world and not really adding much in the way of original content to it, just kind of like playing with existing things and maybe being afraid to expand on the world too much.
Well, yeah. I wanted to go back. So something that you said earlier was just that you were touching on the fact that it's basically the same thing. And I wrote that down. It's just too similar to the thing. They didn't take enough chances. They didn't do enough weird stuff. That like that's what you need in a thing film is also just like weird, interesting, different stuff, and they did a lot of the same stuff. And I think I honestly feel like some of that stems from the fact that they were like, are we making a prequel or are we making a remake? Because remakes, like rather than prequels and prequels and sequels were relevant back then, but it felt to me that they were like, let's just remake the thing.
No, you're right. And naming it The Thing is like the first mistake in my opinion. Because you're immediately setting up the question for people who maybe don't know what this movie is going to be about. Is it a remake or is it a different movie? And I remember when it came out, I didn't know. I think that was a huge mistake.
I think they meant to trick people into the seats though,
which is stupid. And I'm saying they shot themselves in the foot by doing that. Clearly, that's what they chose to do, but I think it was a mistake because what you needed to do is name this something different. Name it The Thing, Norwegian Camp or something better than that. But do something to identify that this is a separate movie. And then like, oh, you know, the other frustrating thing? The poster or the like cover of this movie is the guy in the snow with the long fingers that we saw in the original film. That scene never happens in this movie.
Nope.
What the hell? Why is that on the cover of this movie?
I think they were literally like, let's just market it as a remake. And like also write it as a remake because everything's the same. Everything's predictable. Joel Edgerton's character is literally just Kurt Russell. He like
I called him low rent McCready in my notes.
I mean, he is. It's crazy because like I like Joel Edgerton a lot. He's done a lot of great films, but he's like underutilized. I guess it's before he started to really break out. But it's crazy because it's like they're like he's a pilot. He's gonna be out there and he's gonna come back.
Rough
and
and
you're not
tumble.
gonna know.
Yeah, he's going to come out, he's going to come back, and he's going to have this, he's going to be covered in ice, and he's going to look crazy. You're right, man. They were just trying to hit too many of the same notes, and especially with this character. They didn't make him different. They just made him a different, like, low-rent McCready is what they made this character. Yeah. And then he turns at the end. What did you think about the bringing in the idea of, like, it not being able to mimic inorganic material?
I do like that.
The fillings and stuff. Yeah, because I thought it was kind of clever, because it addresses something murky in the original.
Yeah,
which is,
but I also feel like it doesn't hold that scene, the showdown scene where they're trying to figure out who's what. It doesn't hold a candle to the blood scene because it's just open your mouth and it's like it's not. I mean, it's a cool way, it's a cool workaround, and it's like a cool idea. I will say that the teeth on the ground, solid. That's a solid choice to have the teeth on the ground, and then the reveal of the guy. The reveal of the guy in the helicopter that isn't acting like he's hurt, being the thing, was cool.
It was cool, although it looked like shit when we saw his face. Like, it looked terrible.
Yeah. Sure did, yeah. Well, and you saw the practical effect of that as well.
I know, the practical effect looked fucking good.
Yeah, it looked
but
great.
the additional layer of CG that they slapped onto that made it look bad, which, oh my God.
It just sucks. So I think basically they were like, let's CG this, CG this, CG this, and then they realized, like, we can't have CG and mostly practical because it just clashes too much. So they were like, just make it all CG.
Yeah, and they should have done the other way. They should have said, make it all practical, and you know, and then it would have benefited from that for sure. Yeah, man, you needed somebody to come in and say, I'm making this movie. It's going to have zero CG. It's going to be all practical effects, or at least all practical whenever there's a monster. It's going to be all practical for every monster.
You could just say as much as possible practical effects. Like people do it now. People are starting to really find that balance, and it works much better.
They just needed a better balance. You're right. Or if we use practical effects, if we use CG, I want it to be indiscernible, which is what what happened in like Mad Max Fury Road, right? Where they use CG, but they always tried to do it in such a way that it was kind of indistinguishable from real.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm all for that. And I think something that comes to mind is in The Force Awakens. Do you remember when Rey goes and gets like that powder and pours water in it, and like this bread pops out of this? It's like water, and
Vaguely.
she's like swirling it, and that was a practical effect. And like that's the kind of stuff that I want to see. It's just like a little tiny thing that's barely going on. She just pours some powder into water, and then it's stirring it, and then it was like a sponge or like a balloon or something like bubbled out that made it look like a piece of bread just like formed. And like I don't know, stuff like that is exactly why I think filmmaking is so cool. Like the special effects guys are literally wizards. Like I don't know how they even engineer that, let alone come up with it.
Yeah. So back to the similar story beats. The autopsy scene, when it started happening, I was like, yeah, they gotta have a good autopsy scene in this movie. That totally makes sense. And I was on, but then it was when they went to do the blood test, I think is where I really turned against the movie, because it was like, okay, they're gonna do a slight variation on the exact same iconic scene, and they've already done that on like 2 other iconic scenes, and it started to get to the point where it got frustrating for me, and I was really glad, because I was worried that they were going to literally do the same test. She's like, oh, I have another idea. I'm like, it better not be stick a hot wire in their fucking blood, because that you're pushing it, you're pushing
I will say that's another thing that I noticed is that they figured it out way too quickly, and I know she's smart and everything, but that took away a lot, because like in the original they took a long time to figure out a test.
Well, yes, but I will say in both movies, it was like I could buy it once, but buying it twice became a bit more of a stretch for me. How quickly everyone just goes, oh, okay, yeah, they can completely mimic us, and didn't like take a moment to ask any questions like, can they mimic our speech and our thoughts and our personalities, and is it gonna, like how well is how good is the duplicate? I think and for some reason, like the way that was handled in the original still felt better to me than this one. Well,
I think to me, I agree. I think what it is the fact that they're playing on the fact that the people are suspicious of each other, whether or not there was a creature. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, even if that person's not a creature, they might be a danger to me.
Well, and there's a little bit of that in this one with like the main scientist Norwegian guy who's like a huge dick to what is it, Kate? Early on in the movie, and then like the whole time she's giving him looks like you seem like a thing, regardless of whether or not you are. Yeah, it was. It's like they tried, but it just didn't get there. This whole movie is like almost executed, almost a good idea, almost good effects. It's frustrating, and you got a solid performance out of your lead. And Weinstein would go on to do that Cloverfield movie, which is my favorite Cloverfield movie.
I love that movie, dude. Oh my god, yeah. 10 Cloverfield Lane.
10 Cloverfield Lane.
Highly recommend if you're listening and you haven't seen that and you want to see like a performance that's used well of hers. 10 Cloverfield Lane is amazing.
Yeah, and it's aliens and like weirdness and all kinds of stuff. And then. Maybe aliens, I guess. That's
what I was going to say. No, because it's like, I think my favorite part about that movie is that it's like not necessarily the aliens that are.
Yeah. Which, implication of aliens, whether or not it's real, it'll be, watch the movie and find out, I guess. But the other thing is she was in Fargo season 3, I believe. Have you seen?
Yeah, with Ewan McGregor.
McGregor. So good in that. Yeah. Such a good character. So
she's awesome. I love. Yeah, I think she's a great actress. I'll watch basically anything she's in.
Yeah, and I think her breakthrough role was Scott Pilgrim, right?
That was that was one of them, and I also
wonder
if
did that come out before this movie? Maybe might have. It
did.
She seemed like she was younger in that.
Scott Pilgrim was 2010.
Okay, so that was what made her big, and then she went on to star in this movie, probably.
Yeah. I remember seeing her in Sky High. It's like a superhero high school movie. It's like, I think it was before Scott Pilgrim, but yeah, she was in that. That was the first thing I saw her in, and then yeah, Scott Pilgrim.
Well,
and
she's
I know
got
that
some
movie.
range. She did as good as she was. I think she seemed a little bit, I don't know, maybe too young. I don't know what it is. Like something about
In this movie.
Yeah.
I think
for the role, for the paleontologist role they were trying to give her.
I can see that. I think the thing that I realized about her performance is I was like, she's still the best actor in this movie, but she realized what movie she was in pretty early on. She was like, okay, well.
Well, here's the other thing: we know nothing about her.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like all the characters, regardless of if they're the best character or not, are super forgettable.
We know nothing about her character. What do we know about her? Other than the fact she's a paleontologist and she's like clever at figuring shit out.
She stares at the stars at one point, and that was her big character moment. She could just stare up at the stars, and I was like, yeah.
And they had like a shoehorned in Bechdel test moment where it's like, we're going to have the other female character talk to her just for a moment so that we can check that box.
I didn't even think about that, yeah.
Yeah, and then, that I was so frustrated because to me it felt inauthentic. I don't know. I wanted to see those characters have more of a connection, I guess, but I don't know if there's time for it. But anyway, it's. I wanted to know, like, if we needed to know something about her, which I guess, like, they're looking at the original and they're saying we don't know anything about any of these characters, but you don't need to because they leap off the screen. Right. They seem like real people. That's one of the best parts of that movie. Every one of those guys, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, they all seem like real people with interests and. You know, McCready pouring the whiskey on the computer, and like they just all have like striking character moments.
Like the cook is like on roller skates. It's just like everything. You got to give characters depth in whatever way you can, visually or
quirks.
That's the other thing. Oh my god, I forgot that I didn't even mention this. Is I know that a lot of the original was talking, but a lot of the stuff, a lot of the reveals and things to make us scared or to build tension was just dialogue that people were giving to each other. I just felt like there wasn't enough of showing, you know what I mean? Showing and not just like everybody's dialogue telling you what's scary and what's going to happen.
Yeah. No, I can see that. So the other thing I come back to is the like actual final scene, not the credit scene, but the actual final scene with Kate and Low Rent McCready. It was frustrating because I guess it shows me, like, if you think that you wanted at the end of the original movie for them to reveal who was a thing and who wasn't, watch this scene and tell me that you're not wrong. Because this scene works so much better with when it's a mystery of whether or not the other guy, Childs actually a thing? Is McCready somehow turned? Has he been turned? Or are they both things? I think is the other question at the end at the original, right? Are they both turned and now they're both deciding to wait it out and be found? It's so they could have gone multiple ways with this, and instead they went a way that leaves no ambiguity. And ambiguity is such a big part of the end of this movie that it was kind of weird for them to do that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, once again, but then you have the problem of like, if you do it that way, is it too much of a are you doing the same thing too much? So I just think this is ultimately, it was like someone had an interesting idea, but I think it was ultimately a bad idea. I think this movie ultimately wasn't built on a good foundation, and then it wasn't very well executed. Yeah,
agreed. I think it's unfortunate because like we said, it would have been fun to revisit in a more pleasant way. Because it is a fun world and an interesting creature.
And it was so frustrating for you to send me that video and see how good the effects looked and then how bad they looked on screen. It's very weird to me.
Yeah. Just unfortunate. I think this is the movie a lot of people point to where it was like the breaking point of CG and practical effects, and everybody really, really started to get on board with practical effects and pushing forward in the industry and everything. So, I mean, if that's the case, I'm glad that we got this, so that we could start to get back to some of that practical.
Oh, and I got to call out one other thing. In the original, I felt like I was in Antarctica. I felt very strongly like I believed my setting. In this movie, I didn't believe the setting. Mainly because early on in the film, I know the storm hasn't come yet, whatever. Low Rent McCready tells another guy, hey, go fetch me my stash. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And he goes outside in just like a hat and gloves, like he's walking outside when it's 30 degrees out in you know, where I live, you know, in Oregon. And he just goes out to go like rummaging for these booze. And I don't like, Antarctica is fucking cold, guys. Like, come on. That's the one thing everybody knows. I don't care if there are times where Antarctica warms up a bit. I don't care.
If there's a movie...
If there's a movie set in Antarctica, you need to tell people you understand that Antarctica is the coldest fucking place on Earth. It is.
Yeah.
And somebody who's just going to go walk outside at night and not, like, fucking put on a mask or not, like... I don't know, like, not resist the fact that they're asking them to go outside. I don't know. Like, think about like, The Hateful Eight. Like, nobody wants to fucking go outside in that storm because it's so fucking cold, right? Like, they're not in Antarctica, which is where we are in this movie, where it should be fucking serious. And I just never, like, the cold was very, like, if we want to, like, the cold wasn't a factor. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the original, it felt like it was a huge factor.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you go outside, you're gonna die. Like even if you try to get away from the thing by running outside, you're probably gonna die out there.
Yeah. I really believe that like you're gonna get 100 feet away from camp and you're gonna be fucking frozen popsicle. Right. Like that was kind of like the impression I got, and they just did not do a good job. It was like they said, okay, when the storm comes, that's when the cold comes, but that's not really how cold works. Often it's colder before a storm. Or after a storm, or when it's like still out, you know what I mean? Often like that's when it really drops. Mm-hmm. The storm is just more like ice and snow and wind and shit. So I don't know, man. Like, yeah, I just never bought the setting, which is a huge problem for a film like this because it relies so much on that setting being like a big part of the ice. It's like if you watched Alien and you just never believed they were in space, like or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you have to believe, you have to buy in on the setting, or you're gonna not buy in on the movie.
Yeah, like it's got to be that isolation. It's got to feel like full isolation. Yeah. And it just felt like it would have been too easy for them to get back to the real world. It's also, even when she's like, I can get to the Russia camp. Like
and it felt like it felt like people were chilly. It didn't feel like people were like, oh my god, it's fucking freezing me to death out here. Whenever they were outside, I just never bought that. Whereas, I mean, look at how McCready looked when he came in out of the fucking snow in the original. He looked like he had the ice on his beard was so convincing, and like I know they had some snow in the beard on this one, it just wasn't the same, man.
Agreed.
I don't know, and the way they just left the two guys like tied up in the shed without any obvious heating element. They're just like, yeah, leave them out there. They've almost died from hypothermia, but they'll be okay. And then they are like, I don't know, man. I'm frustrated with some of the logistics of the film, and like, yes, I grant that maybe I'm nitpicking more than I would have, but that's what happens when a movie doesn't land for you. It's gonna start to pile on, and you're gonna notice all these things that maybe you would have forgiven in a better movie.
Yeah, it definitely is. It just snowballs all the way down. And I will say, like, I do believe that this it kind of unfairly gets a lot of like hate just for the CG. And like we said, I think there are things to enjoy about it, but mostly it's not just the CG, is my final thought, I feel like.
No, yeah, I agree. And I think we've highlighted a lot of other issues with the film, and you know, whether it's you know, poorly drawn characters, whether it's too many of the same beats, you know, not convincing setting, you know, we talked about it. Ultimately, this movie was a bad idea, and I can understand why they wanted to make it, but yeah. I don't know. I think we've talked about it enough for a bonus episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I did like watching it, and like ultimately, as much as I've been shitting on it, it wasn't a terrible movie. It just wasn't a good movie. It was a very okay-ish movie.
I think I'll say that it could have been worse.
Oh,
but
sure.
It's still not great.
And I almost wish it had been worse though, because then it could have been one of those movies that was so bad. You know what I mean? Like it becomes good in its own right for being so terrible. But yeah, it just didn't land. Which like I know some people like this movie, and you know that's true for any movie, but for us, it just doesn't hold a candle to the classic original, I think. And so whenever you're coming in off of something that's like iconic, it's going to be tough, and they just didn't do it. They didn't stick the landing on this one. Yeah. But yeah, let us know what other adaptation adjacent films you may want us to cover. We've listed a few on there, but there's definitely a possibility that we haven't thought of some. But we like to cover things that are like adjacent to an adaptation that we've covered. But we also could maybe do like a video game movie or like an adaptation from something else. I don't know. If you guys have any thoughts, definitely send them in. We'll consider it. But yeah, well, hopefully you enjoyed this as your bonus content this month. We were trying something different. Let us know if you want us to keep doing these kind of things or just go back to the news. We're open.
Yeah, and just to bring up something else is sometimes when we're really excited about a movie and we're doing adaptation news or something, we might come in and talk about that as well, because we did that for Infinity War. If you haven't heard that coverage, that was our first one. So
yeah,
anything that you would think that would be interesting for us to talk about, we would like to keep it somewhat adaptation related, but post it in the Facebook group, do whatever you can, and we'll consider it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, if you guys want to send us questions or something, we can definitely address those. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for being a patron. You guys are awesome, and we really appreciate it. And you guys literally keep this show going. So pat yourself on the back for us, because you mean a lot to us.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.